The night has passed, as it always does, quietly, but not without sounds. In a small thatched hut, somewhere in the countryside of 13th century England, the first light of dawn filters through gaps in the wooden shutters. The light is pale, shy, unwilling to disturb the thick shadows of the room. But the hut stirs. A medieval peasant, a man or a woman, it hardly matters, awakens on a straw-stuffed mattress, its stuffing flattened and poking through the coarse linen. The mattress has grown thinner with each season, and the straw whispers with every small shift of the body. There is no pillow, only a bundled cloth. No sheets, just a woolen blanket, heavy and scratchy, that clings to the body with the dampness of the night's breath. The air smells faintly of smoke, from the hearth that still holds the ghost of last night's fire and of the animals nearby. In the corner, a pig stirs. Above, in the loft, a few chickens flutter, disturbed by the quiet movements of waking. Beyond the thin walls, the soft murmur of morning begins, the lowing of cattle in the distance, the sharp crow of a rooster who has yet to understand how many hours lie between now and sunrise. The peasant rises slowly. Bones protest. There is no rush. Far away in a different time but the same early light, a Roman citizen blinks awake. The insula, a crowded Roman apartment block, creaks with life as neighbors shuffle, cough, and begin their own mornings. The bed is narrow, low to the ground, and framed in wood that has known many hands. The mattress, too, is stuffed with straw. But here in the city of Rome, it carries not only the softness of straw but the fine dust of the streets below, the subtle tang of mildew creeping up damp stone walls. Through the thin curtain that serves as a window covering, the world is already moving. Wheels clatter over cobblestones. The hurried footsteps of slaves carrying water jars echo in the alley. Somewhere a baker is stoking his oven. The air is rich with the yeasty promise of bread. Yet the room itself smells of oil lamps, extinguished only hours before. The Roman citizen sits up, stretching stiffly, aware of the cracked tiles beneath their feet. In the rooms below, someone is already arguing. Above, a child is crying. It is morning in the city. There are no roosters here, but the city wakes noisily, unapologetically. Back in the medieval village, the peasant's first act is practical. Stirring the embers in the hearth, coaxing them back to life with bits of dry kindling. The smoke, reluctant, curls into the room before finding its way out through the hole in the roof. The hut is dim, but it glows with a faint, comforting orange. Water is fetched from a wooden bucket, cold from the night. It splashes, sluggish and heavy, into a small basin. Hands are rinsed, faces are wiped, quickly, because the water is cold and will remain cold. There is no bath to fill, no luxury of steam. Cleanliness is a ritual of necessity, not comfort. Meanwhile, in Rome, the citizen performs a similar act, though it feels different. A small jug of water stands near the door. It is tepid, having rested through the night. A splash is poured into a shallow basin, and the hands are cleansed, face patted with a coarse linen cloth. The air is warmer here, but the water still startles the skin. For wealthier citizens, there will be a trip to the public baths later in the day. For others, this splash is enough. The room smells of last night's oil lamp, of dust, and of the faint brine of the Tiber's breath drifting through the streets. There is no fireplace here. Heat is a fleeting guest in Roman insulae, arriving only when invited by the sun. The medieval peasant steps outside. The door is little more than a wooden plank secured with a simple latch. The morning air is cool, moist, and filled with the sharp, earthy smell of churned soil. The ground is soft, not from rain, but from the morning dew that settles heavily over everything. There are no paved roads here, only paths of trampled earth, slick with mud from the footprints of man and beast alike. A cow lows nearby, indifferent to the dawn. Somewhere, bread ovens, communal and crude, begin to exhale their warm breath into the chilly air, mingling with the scent of damp straw and smoke. It is a smell that is both nourishing and wearying. Bread is not a luxury here, but a survival. In Rome, the streets are already alive with smells. From a nearby Papina, a small tavern, the rich aroma of flatbread baking on a hot stone drifts lazily down the alley. There is the sour tang of fermented fish sauce, garum, clinging stubbornly in the air from last night's meals. The cobblestones, still cool from the night, are streaked with puddles, some from rain, others from less polite sources. The Roman citizen pulls aside the curtain to the street. It is too early for the forum's full bustle, but already carts are creaking by, their wooden wheels grumbling under sacks of grain and amphorae of wine. Slaves carry baskets of vegetables, their bare feet slapping softly against stone. A senator's litter passes at a distance, swaying gently, but here in the insula, life is closer to the ground. In both worlds, there is a stillness to the morning, though it is filled with sound. In the medieval village, the stillness is broken by the grumble of animals, the chatter of a distant neighbor, the soft clink of iron tools being prepared for the day's work. Every sound feels far yet close. The village is small, and sound does not travel far before meeting a wall of trees or the rise of a hill. In Rome, the stillness is more of a hum, a constant backdrop of wheels, voices, and the restless shuffle of a city that rarely sleeps, but only slows. And yet in this moment, in both places, there is a shared quietude. The day has not yet demanded much. Hunger has not yet gnawed, nor has labor bent the back. There is only the moment, the breath of cool air, the scent of bread not yet eaten, the feel of coarse cloth against the skin. The medieval peasant and the Roman citizen, centuries apart, stand on the threshold of their day, unaware of each other, yet living echoes of the same human rhythms. But soon they must dress. Simple garments await in the medieval hut, coarse linen, thick wool, worn and mended. The act of dressing is no small task. In the Roman insula, folds of tunics and the drape of a toga, if it's a formal day, await with their own kind of patience. Both lives will begin, not with grandeur, but with cloth. The day begins not with urgency, but with habit. In both the medieval village and the Roman city, dressing oneself is not a moment of expression or vanity. It is a quiet, practical ritual. In the soft half-light of a medieval hut, the peasant reaches for garments that have seen many seasons. There is a linen shift, once white, now dulled by countless washes in cold, soapy water drawn from a communal barrel. It is thin, yet it remains the closest layer to the skin, a small barrier between the body and the coarseness of the outer wool. The shift clings slightly, the morning chill making the fabric feel colder than it is. But there is no time, nor resources for luxuries like warming clothes by the fire. Next comes the tunic, a garment that has been patched and repatched, its original color, a faded brown or perhaps a murky green, long surrendered to time and toil. The wool is thick, spun and woven by hands that are never idle, and though it serves as protection against the wind and the rain, it is not a comfortable embrace. It scratches, stubbornly reminding the wearer of its presence with every movement. The sleeves are narrow, but the fabric has stretched where it has been pulled and tugged into place each day. There is no mirror to consult, no thought of appearance, only the simple satisfaction of being clothed and prepared for labor. A simple rope or leather belt ties the tunic at the waist, cinching the layers and providing a place to hang a small pouch or perhaps a knife, an everyday tool rather than a weapon. For the feet, there may be leather shoes, hand-stitched and well-worn, their soles softened by years of trudging through mud and field. Or perhaps, depending on the season and the fortune of the household, there may be no shoes at all, only thick woolen hose protecting the legs and feet from the worst of the cold. The hose, knitted roughly, sag around the ankles, held up by thin strips of cloth tied just above the knee. Each layer feels less like clothing and more like an extension of the work to come. To dress is to prepare, to arm oneself against the endless tasks of the day, with no illusion of comfort, miles and centuries away, yet somehow just next door in the rhythm of human life, A Roman citizen begins a similar act. The insula is still dim, the morning sun not yet reaching the lower apartments where light is a rare visitor. The citizen's tunic, a simple rectangle of undyed wool sewn into shape, hangs loosely on a peg or a rope strung across the small living space. Its texture is no softer than that of the medieval peasant's garments, though perhaps it has been cleaned more often in the public philonicae, where cloth is beaten and soaked in mixtures not always pleasant to the nose. The tunic is plain, its only embellishment a narrow strip of colored cloth along the edges, if the family's means allow such flourishes. Dressing in a Roman tunic is a matter of folds and ties, but there is no ceremony to it in the early hours. The tunic is slipped over the head, adjusted by pulling at the shoulders and smoothing the fabric down over the chest. It is knee-length for a man, longer for a woman, and belted at the waist with a simple cord or sash. Wealthier Romans may have softer fabrics, imported linens, or even silk, but for the ordinary citizen the tunic is wool, coarse, practical, and familiar. The belt, like the medieval peasant's rope, serves not only to shape the garment, but to hold small necessities. A pouch of coins, a stylus for writing, or a small wax tablet for notes and accounts. If the day requires formality, perhaps a visit to the forum or an appearance before a patron, the Roman might prepare a toga. It is a garment of complexity and patience, a broad expanse of woolen cloth, up to 6 meters long, which must be draped and folded in a particular fashion. There is no haste in donning a toga. It is a slow, deliberate process, requiring focus to ensure the folds fall correctly, the right arm left free, the fabric looping gracefully over the shoulder. It is heavy, cumbersome, and impractical for labor, worn not for comfort, but as a symbol of Roman citizenship and dignity. For most, though, the toga is a garment for special occasions, not for daily life, and the tunic suffices. Sandals are the common footwear in Rome, their leather straps winding up around the ankles, leaving much of the foot exposed to the dust and filth of the streets. The soles are thin, crafted for the dry stones of Roman roads, not for the muddy lanes of a medieval village. For those without the means, even sandals may be a luxury. And bare feet are not uncommon among the lower ranks of Roman society, much like their medieval counterparts. As both the peasant and the citizen dress, there is a shared awareness of fabric and weight, of the slow, familiar movements that begin every day. The peasant ties the belt with a practiced tug, feeling the comforting weight of a small knife against their hip, while the Roman citizen smooths down the tunic, adjusts the belt, and perhaps fastens a small brooch to keep the fabric in place. There are no wardrobes filled with choices, no mirrors to reflect upon one's image. Clothing is not an art, but a necessity, worn until it frays beyond repair, then patched, mended, and worn again. Yet, in these quiet, repetitive motions, there is a rhythm that binds both lives. The sensation of rough wool against skin, the faint tug of a belt tightening around the waist, the coolness of leather straps pressed against bare feet, all these sensations create a small, grounding moment before the day's labor begins. For the medieval peasant, dressing is a prelude to a day spent in fields or workshops, stooping beneath the sky, hands sinking into earth or gripping rough-hewn tools. For the Roman citizen, it may lead to the marketplace, to client meetings, or to managing a small shop front, where the folds of a tunic must be adjusted constantly to keep up appearances in the bustling streets. And as they step outside into their respective mornings, the medieval peasant walks into the softness of earth, the mud squelching underfoot, while the Roman steps onto stone, feeling the cold hardness of the city's bones beneath the thin leather soles. Both, in their own way, prepare to face a day that is neither glamorous nor leisurely. The patience required to dress in these old, worn fabrics is the same patience needed to endure a life of labor. There is no expectation of new clothes next season, no thought of discarding garments at the whim of fashion. Clothing is a companion in toil, aging alongside the wearer. The smell of wool lingers on their skin, mingling with the sense of smoke, dust, and sweat that will only deepen as the hours pass. The medieval tunic will catch the burrs and stray threads from the fields, while the Roman tunic will gather the fine grit of the city's ever-churning life. Both will bear silent witness to the burdens of the day, their scratches and stains telling stories no one will pause to hear. In this quiet ritual of dressing, one might ask, who had it worse? The peasant, with their coarsely spun layers and bare feet braving the damp, uneven paths? Or the Roman, draped in folds of unyielding wool, navigating the crowded, noisy streets in thin sandals? But the garments, indifferent to history's judgments, simply serve their purpose, wrapping the human form in a fabric embrace, preparing each for a day that will be in its own way a small battle of endurance. And so, as the belts are tied and the last folds adjusted, the day's work calls. But before the labor begins, there is one small pause, a moment for breakfast, a meager, quiet meal that must suffice, because hunger is patient but never absent. In Part 3, we will drift into the morning meal. A crust of stale bread in a medieval hut, a bite of bread dipped in wine in a Roman insula. Both small beginnings to long, hungry days, but that we'll explore slowly next time. The day has only just begun, yet already the body remembers its hunger. In the medieval hut, the peasant moves slowly, not because of laziness, but because there is little to hasten toward. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is not a feast, nor even a meal in the modern sense. It is a small, functional pause, something to quiet the belly for a few hours until work demands attention once again. On the wooden table, rough and scarred from years of use, lies a round loaf of bread, baked days ago in the communal oven. Its crust has grown hard, the surface marked by cracks where time has pulled it apart. The bread is dense, coarse, made from flour that is never pure. Bits of husk remain, adding a gritty texture to each bite. If the family has been fortunate, if the harvest was decent and the Lord's taxes were not too heavy, there may be a small wedge of cheese, sharp and crumbly, set aside for such mornings. But often, there is only the bread. The peasant tears at the loaf with hands that know this ritual well. The bread is chewed slowly, softened with a sip of ale, weak and watery, brewed not for pleasure but for safety. Water, drawn from the same streams where animals drink and children play, is never trusted. Ale, though thin and barely fermented, is safer, and so it accompanies nearly every meal, no matter how meager. The ale is cool, faintly sour, and its bitterness lingers on the tongue long after the bread has been swallowed. There is no butter, no jam, no sweet indulgence to accompany the meal. Only bread and ale, sometimes cheese, and on rare mornings, perhaps an apple or a handful of wild berries found along the hedgerow. But such fruits are fleeting gifts of the season, and most mornings the peasant does not expect them. There is no tablecloth on the rough wooden surface, no plates or utensils. The bread is broken directly by hand, shared in pieces among those present in silence or in soft murmurs. Conversations, if they happen, are brief, practical. Remarks about the weather, the tasks awaiting in the fields, the condition of a sick animal. The peasant eats not to savor, but to fuel, chewing slowly, methodically, eyes already casting glances at the door, knowing that work waits just beyond it. The hearth crackles softly in the background, sending up lazy plumes of smoke that mingle with the dampness clinging to the hut's walls. It is a familiar scent of wood smoke and stale bread, of wool and earth. It is not unpleasant, but it is heavy, filling the small space like a presence of its own. Far away, but somehow near in the quiet rhythm of history, a Roman citizen greets the morning with a breakfast of similar humility. In the modest confines of a Roman insula, space is scarce, yet the ritual is much the same. The day begins with bread, flat, round, sometimes with a slight char where it met the baker's stone. It is fresh if one is lucky enough to live near a good baker, but more often it is yesterday's bread, slightly tougher, needing a little help to soften before it can be enjoyed. The Roman does not reach for ale, but for wine. Not the rich, luxurious wines reserved for banquets and wealthy villas, but a rough, sour vintage, watered down until it is more practical than pleasurable. Wine, like ale, is safer than water, and it serves to moisten the bread, transforming its hardened edges into something pliable, easier to chew. There may be a few olives on the table, briny, oily, their dark skins gleaming dully in the morning light, or a smear of cheese, soft and pungent, scraped thinly onto the bread. But these are not guaranteed. For many Romans, the morning meal is as sparse as it is for the peasant. A simple piece of bread, perhaps dipped in a small dish of olive oil if the household can afford such luxuries that week. For some, especially those in the lower floors of the insula, where rents are higher but space is tighter, the morning meal might be no more than a handful of dried figs or a spoonful of porridge left over from the night before. The Roman citizen eats quickly, seated on a low stool, perhaps standing, as the city stirs beyond the thin walls. The insula creaks with life. Footsteps overhead, a neighbor's argument drifting through the open window, the faint splash of water being poured into a basin. Like the peasant, the Roman eats with their hands, tearing bread, dipping, chewing slowly. There are no forks, no knives for this meal, just the tactile, grounding sensation of bread in hand, of wine-wet crumbs lingering at the corners of the mouth. Breakfast is not a social event, nor a moment of relaxation. It is a necessity. Something to keep hunger at bay until the day's business allows for a more substantial meal, or until it does not. Both the peasant and the Roman citizen understand the patience of hunger. Neither expects fullness from this morning ritual. They eat to prepare their bodies for work, knowing that energy must be rationed carefully. The peasant's work is waiting in the fields, where the soil is heavy from last night's dew and tools are blunt from constant use. The Roman's tasks may be more varied, running errands for a patron, opening a small shop, or perhaps preparing to accompany a client to the forum. But the hunger is familiar, and the modesty of the meal is accepted without complaint. The air in the medieval hut is cool and damp, the lingering mist of the night still pressing against the tiny window's wooden shutter. Outside, the sounds of other huts waking blend into a soft murmur, a chorus of footsteps, muted greetings, and the occasional low grunt of livestock. In Rome, the air is drier, warmer, though heavy with the smells of the city. The faint tang of fermenting garum from the fish sauce vendors, the smoky breath of bakers' ovens, the dust that never fully settles on the stone streets. Both environments carry their own weight, their own textures and scents, wrapping themselves around the morning like another layer of clothing. As the last piece of bread is chewed, as the final sip of ale or wine is swallowed, there is no lingering. The meal, if it can be called that, is over as soon as it begins. The peasant rises, adjusting their tunic, tightening the belt, perhaps reaching for a wooden hoe or a bundle of tools. The Roman citizen, too, makes ready, securing sandals, gathering writing tablets, adjusting the folds of a tunic that will crease and sag as the day unfolds. There is a shared understanding between these two figures, though separated by centuries and by geography. Breakfast is a quiet, uncelebrated act. It is not for pleasure, nor for leisure, but for preparation. A moment of stillness before the body is put to work, a small negotiation with hunger that never fully satisfies. Yet, in this act, there is a certain comfort. The familiarity of routine, the predictability of simple food, offers a kind of stability, even when the day ahead holds its own uncertainties. As the peasant steps out into the muddy lane, the ground soft beneath their worn shoes, they carry the quiet weight of a half-filled belly. The Roman, descending the narrow stairs of the insula, feels the same. Their paths are different, the peasant toward the Lord's land, the Roman toward the bustling market or the shaded colonnades of the forum. But their mornings have been reflections of each other. In their modest breakfasts, their shared patience, they are not so far apart. And so, as the day beckons with its endless demands, they move forward. The medieval peasant with a wooden hoe resting on their shoulder, the Roman citizen with a wax tablet tucked into their belt, both walking into lives where work is not a choice but a constant. The morning air is heavier now, no longer filled with the hush of dawn, but with the subtle movements of life returning to its routines. In the medieval village, the peasant steps outside, the rough leather of their shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth. The ground is soft with last night's rain, and though the sky holds the pale promise of eventual sun, the lingering mist still clings low over the fields. The peasant's path is not paved, not even well-trodden in places, but it is familiar. Each rut, each stone, each puddle is known, catalogued by years of walking the same route. The wooden hoe rests against their shoulder, its handle worn smooth where countless hands have gripped it, the blade dulled and dented by stubborn soil and embedded stones. The village lane is a quiet place, though not silent. The sounds of morning labor echo softly, a cart wheel creaking as it turns, a dog barking at a wandering goose, the distant thud of an axe splitting firewood. The peasant's breath clouds faintly in the chill, but it is not a discomfort that is noticed anymore. Cold is simply part of the morning, just as the ache in the back and the weight of the hoe are. Walking to the Lord's land is not a journey in the modern sense. It is a daily rhythm, as much a part of the body as breath and heartbeat. The fields await, and the peasant moves toward them without hurry, because the work does not care when it begins. It will be there, endless and patient, whether approached with haste or with resignation. In the distant sprawl of Rome, the Roman citizen is beginning their own walk, descending narrow stairways of the insula, feet bare or in thin sandals, stepping out into streets that are already stirring with activity. The Roman street is paved, though the paving stones are uneven, worn smooth in places, cracked and loose in others. The air here smells different from the village. It is thicker, tinged with the sharpness of smoke from bakers' ovens, the sour tang of fermenting wine, and the occasional gust of something less pleasant rising from the drains that snake beneath the city's surface. The Roman moves with a similar pace to the peasant, not rushed, but with purpose. The morning is not for leisure. It is for duties, errands, or for standing in the shadowed porticos of a patron's home, waiting for a brief audience. The streets are alive in their own subdued way. Shopkeepers unlatching wooden shutters, vendors arranging their wares on simple carts, children darting between adults, laughing too loudly for the hour. Animal droppings dot the pathways, horse, mule, dog, and the Roman, like the peasant, steps over them with practiced indifference. The city is no cleaner than the village. Its dirt is simply of a different texture. The peasant reaches the edge of the Lord's land, where personal space ends and obligation begins. The fields are vast, not in the grand sweeping sense of endless plains, but in the quiet oppression of knowing that each patch of earth represents hours of bending, lifting, and digging. The soil is heavy, darkened by rain, sticking to the wooden blades of tools, clumping onto boots until each step feels like dragging a small weight. There are no fences, only the occasional marker, a line of stones, a tuft of overgrown grass that separates one man's burden from another's. The peasant joins others in the field, a nod of acknowledgement sufficient to replace conversation. There is no need for words when the day's task is so clearly understood. For the Roman citizen, the forum may be the first destination. It is the heart of public life, a space both open and dense, where columns rise and voices blur into a constant hum of negotiation, gossip, and transaction. The Roman does not carry a hoe, but perhaps a small pouch of documents, a tablet for notes, a stylus for recording debts or agreements. Work in the forum is not tilling the soil, but it is labor nonetheless. There are coins to count, promises to secure, trades to arrange. The forum's stones are worn smooth beneath countless footsteps, yet every day they host new ambitions, small and large. The Roman citizen moves among them, knowing that their status, whether low or middling, dictates not just what work they will find, but how they will be seen. Back in the fields, the peasant begins the repetitive motion that will define the day. The hoe rises, swings, and sinks into the earth. There is a rhythm to it, a pace set by necessity rather than choice. The body leans into the task, muscles engaging in familiar patterns, the mind retreating into a quiet place where hours can pass unnoticed. Occasionally there's a pause to straighten the back, to glance at the sky, to adjust the belt where it cuts too tightly. The work is physical, unrelenting, yet it carries a certain simplicity. The peasant knows the task, knows the expected result, and though the reward is small, bare survival, a share of the harvest, it is tangible. In the Roman market, labor takes a different form. Here, a tradesman might be setting out clay pots, each arranged carefully to catch a potential buyer's eye. A scribe may be seated at a makeshift stall, offering to draft letters for those who cannot write, his fingers already ink-stained from the morning's first requests. Street vendors cry out their offerings: bread, fish, wine diluted to varying degrees, each voice layering onto the city's constant drone. Even clients, waiting on the steps of a wealthy patron's home for a daily stipend or favor, are engaged in a kind of work. The work of appearing, of being visible, of maintaining the fragile threads of patronage that might ensure tomorrow's meal. Though the environments differ, both the peasant and the Roman citizen are bound by the same undercurrent. Their work is not optional. It is the means by which life continues. The quiet contract each has with the day. The tools are different. A hoe, a stylus, a vendor's cart, but the wear on the hands, the dull ache that settles in the lower back by midday, these are shared experiences. There is no glory in their labor, no expectation of advancement. The peasant will not rise beyond the fields. The Roman tradesman's stall will look much the same year after year. Yet, there is a strange resilience in this monotony. The work persists, and so do they. The streets of Rome are bustling now, the sun warming the stone and casting long shadows between the colonnades. In the village fields, the sun's warmth is slower to arrive, filtered through low-hanging clouds, yet its presence is felt in the way the earth softens, in the thin sheen of sweat forming beneath the peasant's tunic. Both worker and citizen press on. Their mornings spent in the quiet labor of survival. There are moments of brief pause. For the peasant, a hand wiped across a brow, a glance toward the distant tree line where the land seems softer, less demanding. For the Roman, a lean against a column, watching the ebb and flow of the marketplace, calculating which corner might bring better fortune as the day unfolds. These pauses are not true rests, they are merely small allowances, brief acknowledgments of the body's limits before duty calls them back into motion. As the morning deepens and the sun claims its place in the sky, both the peasant and the Roman begin to feel the familiar pull of midday fatigue. The stomach, modestly filled from the early meal, begins to speak again, quietly at first, then with more insistence. There is no certainty of when the next bite will come, but hunger is an old companion, and its patience is matched by that of the workers. Their paths diverge, one through muddy fields, the other along stone-paved streets, yet their days are shaped by the same quiet persistence. They work because there is no alternative. They move through tasks that, while mundane, are essential. The weight of a hoe in a calloused hand, the shuffle of sandals against the dust-laden stones. Both lives inch forward through repetition, through endurance. And as the sun climbs higher, as the air grows heavier, the thought of a brief rest becomes a quiet hope. Not a luxurious respite, but a short moment to sit, to breathe, to perhaps eat, if there is anything left to eat. The morning deepens, and with it, the labor of the day settles into its familiar, unhurried rhythm. For the medieval peasant, the field becomes the entire world. The sky, though vast, presses down like a lid, holding in the dampness of the earth and the persistent scent of wet soil. Every movement is deliberate. The wooden hoe, lifted and swung, bites into the stubborn ground with a dull, resistant thud. It is a sound the peasant has known since childhood, as constant as breath, as inevitable as rain. The work is slow, not because it can be any other way, but because the soil allows no haste. Each furrow must be cut, each clod of earth turned and broken with patience. There is no rushing through the stubborn thickness of medieval land. The body bends and straightens again, following the age-old pattern of human labor against the unyielding earth. The peasant's back aches, a dull, familiar pulse that will not fade, but is never sharp enough to stop the work. Fingers grip the worn handle tightly, splinters long since embedded in the calloused skin, unnoticed now. Occasionally, a stone hidden beneath the surface will jolt the hoe, sending a brief shiver through the arms, but there is no frustration. The earth does not care. The earth does not change. The labor is what it has always been, necessary, unremarkable, and entirely absorbing. Around the field, other peasants move in similar patterns. There is no conversation, not because of silence, but because breath is reserved for the task. Words, if spoken, are brief, murmured over the scrape of wooden blades and the soft squelch of boots pulling free from the mud. The rhythm is communal, yet deeply personal, each body working through its own slow dialogue with the land. In the distance, the manor's outlines rise, indifferent, observing. The Lord's land does not work itself, but its presence weighs quietly upon those who labor. Far from these muddy fields, under a sky that feels warmer but no less pressing, the Roman citizen engages in a labor of a different texture. The Forum, with its grand columns and uneven paving stones, is alive with movement, yet much of it is a performance of work. The scribe, seated at a small wooden desk beneath a shaded portico, dips a reed pen into a jar of ink, carefully scripting letters for those who cannot. The wax tablets stack slowly, messages for patrons, contracts for trades, notices to be delivered across the city's twisting streets. The task is delicate, requiring a patience not unlike that of the peasant, though the scribe's fingers grow cramped, not calloused. The ink stains do not wash away easily, marking the hands in a different kind of permanence. Nearby, a tradesman arranges his wares, ceramic pots, small oil lamps, woven baskets, each item placed with the hope that a passerby might pause, might buy, might remember. The tradesman's work is not heavy in the way of the field, but it is exhausting in its own right. There is a labor in persuasion, in standing hour after hour, calling into the indifferent tide of the city's movement. His voice, though soft, must be repeated endlessly, offering the same phrases, the same gestures, until they lose their meaning. Coins exchanged, if they come at all, are few, and yet each one feels like a small victory against the weight of the day. There are others, too, the street cleaners with their rough brooms of bundled twigs, stirring dust from one stone to another, the water sellers balancing clay amphorae on wooden yokes, their steps cautious across the uneven ground. The city's laborers are many, and though their tasks differ in detail, the rhythm of their work shares a kinship with that of the peasant's field. Repetition, endurance, the slow, careful management of a body that must continue moving. In both the field and the forum, time stretches. There are no clocks, no hourly chimes to break the flow. Instead, time is felt in the body. In the peasant's growing ache between the shoulder blades, in the Roman scribe's cramping wrist. The sun is a slow-moving gauge, its angle a quiet reminder of how much labor still lies ahead. There is no expectation that the work will be completed today. The work, after all, is never truly finished. Each task completed is merely a space cleared for the next. And so the morning hours are filled with a kind of patient futility that is neither bitter nor triumphant. It simply is. For the peasant, the most satisfying sound is not the completion of a row, but the soft crackle of dry earth breaking open beneath the hoe. Each swing is a small, tangible progress, a defiant gesture against the soil's resistance. There is no applause, no acknowledgement, but there is the private satisfaction of seeing the ground yield, however slightly. For the Roman citizen, progress is measured in other ways. A few more tablets completed, a handful of coins tucked into a pouch, a nod from a patron that might, if fortune is kind, lead to a slightly better day tomorrow. These are small victories, invisible to others but deeply known to the worker who claims them. As the sun climbs higher, the labor shifts subtly. Movements become more measured, not slower, but economical, conserving what energy remains before the midday break. The peasant wipes a sleeve across a sweat-damp brow, smudging soil and sweat into a single, familiar texture. The Roman straightens from his desk, stretches fingers that ache from gripping stylus or coin pouch, eyes narrowing against the city's reflective glare. Both lives, though shaped by different surroundings, share this mutual pause, a fleeting moment when the body asserts its quiet protest, when labor becomes heavier, not from the task itself, but from the hours already spent within it. In the village, the sounds of labor are soft and rhythmic. The scrape of the hoe, the rustle of wind through unharvested crops, the occasional call of a bird overhead. These are gentle, constant companions, filling the gaps between effort and thought. In Rome, the sounds are layered, more chaotic in texture, but no less repetitive. The clatter of cartwheels over stones, the shouted haggling of merchants, the distant splash of a fountain. Neither place offers silence, but neither is deafening. Both environments hum with the quiet persistence of people working not for wealth or fame, but for the basic continuance of life. Occasionally, there are interruptions. A stray goat wanders into the field, nudged back toward its pen with a soft curse. In the forum, a passing official may command attention, drawing the eyes of those who briefly dream of patronage, though most will return to their work unacknowledged. These moments ripple the surface of the day, but do not alter its course. The labor continues, as it always does, and yet, even in the monotony, there is an undercurrent of awareness, an understanding that these quiet, repetitive actions are the threads that bind daily life. The peasant, though bent over the soil, senses the shift in wind, the subtle moisture in the air that hints at coming weather. The Roman tradesman watches the flow of the crowd, noticing the slight change in pace that might signal an opportunity for a sale or the need to reposition a stall. Both are attuned to their environments, not through conscious effort, but through years of necessity. The body grows heavier with each passing hour, the mind sinking into a space where thought and action blend into a single, continuous motion. There is no anticipation of rest yet, but the knowledge that rest will come, however briefly, is enough to keep the labor moving forward. There is a strange comfort in this rhythm, a kind of meditative steadiness that numbs the sharpness of time. As midday approaches, the thought of a break becomes a soft, persistent whisper. Not a meal, perhaps, not in any luxurious sense, but a brief reprieve. A moment to sit, to let the hoe rest against the field's edge, to lean against a shaded wall in the forum, to breathe without the weight of labor pressing so insistently against the chest. The sun, now confidently overhead, casts its weight upon both the open fields of the medieval countryside and the narrow stone alleys of ancient Rome. In both worlds, the light has shifted, not the gentle, silvery glow of morning, but a sharper, more insistent presence. It does not ask permission, it simply arrives, seeping into every surface. For the medieval peasant, the fields grow warmer, though not yet stifling. The soil beneath their feet begins to lose its morning dampness, turning from sticky mud to a dry, crumbly dust that clings to hems and soles. The wooden handle of the hoe feels warmer against their palms now, not uncomfortable, but a quiet reminder that time is pressing forward. There is a moment around this hour when the body's rhythm begins to hesitate, not out of laziness, but as a necessary act of survival. Muscles, long accustomed to constant motion, begin to whisper their complaints, not loudly but persistently enough that even the most dutiful worker must pause. The peasant straightens slowly, vertebrae creaking softly like the bending of old wood, and lets the hoe rest against a stone boundary. Around them, other figures in the field mirror the motion, a quiet agreement passing between them that now is the time, not for a meal in any generous sense, but for whatever small mercy the midday can offer. The peasant moves toward a patch of shade, perhaps no more than a thin line cast by a leaning tree or the slanted roof of a nearby shed. The air is no cooler in this shadow, but the absence of direct sunlight is a kindness in itself. From a pouch tied at their belt, they draw out a small hunk of bread, its crust hardened from days of storage, the inner crumb dense and chewy. It is not much, but it is something to chew upon, something to ground the body before returning to the field's demands. If fortune has been kind, perhaps there is a sliver of cheese, sharp and dry, to be savored slowly, sparingly, each bite a small, private luxury. In Rome, the midday pause unfolds in its own layered way. The city is louder, fuller, yet even here the hour carries a weight that presses upon daily life. The siesta, as it is known, is not a universal privilege, but it is observed by many in one form or another. The wealthier citizens retreat behind the thick walls of their domus, where the air is marginally cooler, the light softened by painted murals and flowing curtains. Servants move quietly, offering platters of fruit, bowls of water for washing, while their masters recline on couches, allowing the heaviness of the hour to settle gently over them. But for the common citizen, the small tradesman, the scribe, the street vendor, rest is a negotiation. There are no private courtyards or shaded atriums. Instead, they seek out the long shadows of the porticos, the cooler corners beneath temple steps, or the narrow gaps between buildings where the sun's reach is momentarily blocked. A scribe, having finished his morning's list of commissions, might fold his wax tablets, tuck them carefully into a worn leather satchel, and lean back against a marble column, eyes half-lidded, listening not to silence but to the softened murmur of the city's heartbeat as it slows under the noon sun. Vendors, whose cries have dulled from the morning's eager pitches, now speak more softly, if at all. Some sit beside their carts, watching the flow of passers-by with a distant, unhurried gaze, knowing that sales are fewer in these sluggish hours. The water sellers, whose work persists despite the heat, move more slowly, their clay amphorae sloshing softly as they pass. Even the animals, stray dogs, tethered mules, cart horses, seem to have adopted a slower, heavier pace, as if acknowledging that the midday is not for haste. For both the peasant and the Roman citizen, this midday rest is not a true reprieve. It is not a luxury, not a full retreat from labor, but a small, necessary pause. It is the body's quiet protest and the day's brief concession. In the field, the peasant sits, legs stretched out before them, fingers idly tracing patterns in the dusty earth. There is no chatter, no burst of energy, just the soft murmur of a neighboring worker, perhaps sharing a scrap of gossip, or perhaps sitting in silence, content with the companionship of shared fatigue. In Rome, conversation drifts lazily among those gathered in the shade. A few words about a magistrate's decree, a half-hearted discussion of grain prices, a quiet observation of a street performer attempting to capture the attention of the few who still wander the sunlit streets. The air carries the sense of cooked meats from nearby taverns, though for many, these aromas remain a distant promise, unaffordable luxuries that drift teasingly across their paths. In these quiet moments, time itself feels different. It does not pass in minutes or hours, but in heartbeats, in slow, measured breaths. There is no urgency, only a gentle awareness of the present. The peasant leans back, eyes closed for a moment, listening to the soft rustle of wind through the thatch of a nearby roof, the distant cluck of a hen somewhere behind the village's edge. The Roman citizen, seated on a worn stone step, feels the coolness of marble against their back, hears the rhythmic splash of a public fountain, the murmured prayers of a passing priest. Yet even in rest, there is an understanding that the labor is not finished. The fields still stretch endlessly toward the horizon, their furrows waiting to be turned. The forum, though quieter now, will soon stir again with the business of the afternoon. The pause is brief, as all pauses are in lives shaped by necessity. But it is enough. Enough to ease the weight on the spine, enough to moisten the lips with a sip of weak ale or watered wine, enough to allow the mind a moment's drift away from the demands of work. For the peasant, the return to labor begins not with a sudden call, but with a shared, unspoken shift. One by one, figures rise from their resting places, shoulders rolled, tools reclaimed, bodies steeling themselves against the long hours that remain. There is no bell to mark the end of rest, only the subtle pull of duty, the quiet knowledge that the field does not finish itself. The hoe is lifted once more, the rhythm of earth and wood resuming its steady conversation. In Rome, the afternoon breathes new life into the city's veins. The merchants stretch, adjust their stalls, raise their voices a touch louder, calling out to those who begin to emerge from their shaded retreats. Scribes unroll their tablets, dip their pens, and prepare for the next round of clients. Laborers resume their sweeping, their carrying, their small acts of keeping the city moving. The siesta has passed, not vanished, but gently folded back into the fabric of the day. The midday rest, fleeting though it is, leaves a subtle imprint on both the peasant and the Roman citizen. It is not enough to erase the fatigue, not enough to restore the body fully, but it serves as a small, essential kindness amidst a life where labor is constant and rest is rationed carefully. The day continues, but with a slight softening of edges, as if the world itself had taken a brief, slow breath before pressing onward. As the sun begins its slow descent, the heat will shift, not in temperature but in presence. The shadows will lengthen, the light will lose its harshness, and the labor will take on a different rhythm. But for now, the afternoon awaits, steady and patient, ready to reclaim those who paused, however briefly, to sit in its shade. The afternoon moves onward, slow and indifferent, and with it, the human need for some semblance of cleanliness begins to stir. Not as a grand ritual, but as a small, practical response to the accumulating dust, sweat, and grime that clings to bodies without invitation. In the medieval village, the notion of washing is humble, grounded not in luxury but in necessity. The peasant, having spent long hours among soil and livestock, feels the weight of filth settle like a second skin. The hands, rough and earth-stained, are the first to be noticed with little expectation that they will ever truly be clean. Near the center of the village stands a communal barrel filled with water collected from a nearby stream. Its surface, faintly rippling beneath the touch of a light breeze, reflects the dull gray of an overcast sky. The water is not fresh in the sense of purity, but it is what is available. The peasant approaches, cupping coarse hands to lift a splash of the cool liquid to their face. The sensation is brief, a sharp, cold sting that cuts through the afternoon's lingering warmth. There is no soap, no fragrant oils. A simple cloth, perhaps linen if luck has been kind, is used to rub away the most visible layers of dirt, working in small, methodical circles across cheeks, forearms, and neck. It is not a transformation, but a gesture, a quiet attempt to feel human beneath the layers of toil. Feet, encased all day in leather shoes softened by mud, are left as they are. The dirt will return, the dust will cling again. It is not about achieving cleanliness, but about reclaiming a small sense of order amidst a life that seldom allows it. Hair, tangled and heavy, is brushed with fingers rather than combs. The straw fibers of a peasant's bed will greet it again soon enough. These small ablutions are not done in private. There is no expectation of solitude. Neighbors, family members, fellow laborers all share the same space, the same water, the same brief indulgence of wiping away the day's most obvious marks. In Rome, the relationship with cleanliness is both more elaborate and yet equally flawed. The city prides itself on its baths, grand public spaces where citizens from all walks of life come to participate in the ritual of washing. Yet, beneath the marble arches and mosaic floors, cleanliness remains an approximation. For the average Roman, the afternoon presents an opportunity, if time and coin allow, to visit one of these bathhouses, not a retreat but a habitual pause in the day's routine. Inside, the baths breathe with a humid warmth, the air thick with the mingling scents of sweat, oils, and lingering traces of incense. The frigidarium, tepidarium, and caldarium, cold, warm, and hot rooms, each offer their own sensory experiences, but for most, the process remains simple. Clothes are shed, folded without ceremony into small alcoves, and the body, exposed and unremarkable among so many others, steps into the warm embrace of steam and stone. There is no lather of soaps as we know them. Instead, olive oil is poured, or rather, smeared across the skin, massaged gently by hand or with the assistance of a fellow bather. The oil serves not only as a cleanser, but as a balm against the dust of the city. Once the body is sufficiently coated, a strigil, a curved metal blade, is used to scrape away the mixture of oil, sweat, and dirt. The scraping sound is soft but distinct, a rhythmic hiss against the skin, repeated with patience and familiarity. It is a satisfying ritual, though perhaps not as thorough as one might hope, for the water, shared by many, cannot claim true purity. Around the baths, conversations murmur gently, politics, business, idle gossip, spoken in tones that neither intrude nor demand attention. The baths are not silent, but they are not loud. They hum with a kind of public intimacy, where personal boundaries are acknowledged in glances rather than words. For those of higher status, there might be attendants to assist in the process, but for the majority, the act of cleaning is shared, communal, and perhaps more performative than effective. Outside, in the poorer quarters of the city, there are those who cannot afford even the modest fee of the public baths. For them, cleanliness is reduced to a splash of water from a communal fountain, a quick wiping down with a cloth, much like the medieval peasant. A simple ritual, performed under the open sky, amidst the chatter of neighbors and the clatter of passing carts. There is no shame in this, only the quiet acceptance of life's constraints. Both the medieval peasant and the Roman citizen understand, in their own way, that cleanliness is not a destination but a cycle. The dust returns. The sweat seeps anew. The grime of work, of city, of field, is an ever-present companion. And yet the ritual persists, not because it offers transformation, but because it offers a brief reclaiming of self amidst the demands of survival. These small acts, the splash of cold water, the scrape of a strigil, are not about vanity, but about a quiet assertion of dignity. The textures of this cleansing are vivid. For the peasant, the cold bite of water against sun-warmed skin, the rough scratch of a coarse cloth, the familiar scent of earth that never fully leaves. For the Roman, the glide of oil across tired muscles, the precise, almost meditative sweep of metal against flesh, the mingling sense of stone, steam, and bodies within the bathhouse's walls. Different in detail, yet united in their quiet pursuit of temporary relief. As the washing ends, there is no lingering. The day still holds tasks. The peasant returns to the cottage, perhaps to mend tools, to tend to livestock, or to prepare for the evening meal. The Roman steps back into the city's labyrinth of streets, adjusting tunics, slipping worn sandals back onto feet still damp from the baths. Cleanliness, or something close to it, has been achieved, however briefly, but life continues to move forward. And so, with bodies slightly refreshed but never fully cleansed, both the peasant and the Roman citizen step into the afternoon's remaining hours. The work will call again, the dust will gather anew. But for now, there is a small, almost imperceptible lightness in their steps, a quiet gratitude for water, for oil, for the simple ritual of wiping away the day's weight, if only for a moment. The sun, though past its zenith, still clings stubbornly to the sky, casting long stretched shadows across the medieval fields and the Roman streets alike. The midday pause, brief, insufficient but essential, has passed, and now the body resumes its slow conversation with labor. There is no signal, no bell to summon them back, but rather an unspoken agreement with time itself. The afternoon is for work, and so they work. In the medieval village, the peasant rises from the patch of shade where they had briefly rested, brushing off dust and stray straw that clings to their coarse tunic. The wooden hoe, splintered from years of use, is once again gripped with familiarity. There is no ceremony, no dramatic return to toil. The work was never truly left behind. The field awaits, its furrows half-turned, the soil as indifferent as ever. The peasant leans into the rhythm, step, dig, lift, turn. The same movements repeated, not with resignation, but with a quiet acceptance. The earth gives what it gives when it chooses, and the laborer's role is simply to keep asking. Around them, others mirror the same steady gestures. There is no rush, haste would only exhaust. Instead, the movements are measured, deliberate, like the slow ticking of a clock whose hands are carved from wood and stone. The soundscape is soft, the thud of metal against earth, the rustle of leaves in the distant hedgerow, the occasional lowing of cattle in a nearby pasture. Voices, when they come, are low and infrequent. Words are not wasted under the afternoon sun, yet not all work demands the open field. In the shadowed corners of a cottage, another peasant sits by the hearth, spindle in hand, coaxing threads from rough wool, turning the wheel with a practiced patience that feels almost meditative. The fibers twist, loop, and tighten, their texture rough against calloused fingers. Weaving, mending, repairing tools. These are labors of necessity, not luxury. The wooden stool creaks beneath them, a quiet, rhythmic counterpoint to the whir of the spindle's spin. In ancient Rome, the afternoon reawakens in a different cadence, but with a similar inevitability. The bathhouses have emptied for now, their steam lingering behind as a ghost of midday indulgence. The forum stirs once more, its colonnades casting sharp-edged shadows across the mosaic floors. Merchants, who had leaned lazily against their stalls during the hottest hours, now straighten, adjusting wares, raising their voices in gentle, persuasive tones. The baker arranges his loaves anew, their crusts darkened from the morning's fires. The fishmonger, with hands that never lose their scent of salt and sea, fans away the persistent flies, calling to passers-by with the same phrases, the same bargains, as he did the day before. For the scribes, the afternoon brings another round of work. Seated at stone benches, their wax tablets resting upon their knees, they etch letters with careful precision, each stroke of the stylus deliberate. Contracts, letters, records, most of it mundane, some of it important, but all requiring the same quiet focus. The scratches of stylus against wax are soft but constant, a subdued chorus of thought transcribed into form. Artisans return to their workshops, their fingers resuming the slow, thoughtful process of shaping clay, carving wood, hammering metal into utility and beauty. A potter's wheel spins lazily, coaxed into motion by a foot that has learned the perfect rhythm. The clay, wet and cool, responds beneath palms with a subtle give, shaped into vessels that will hold oil, grain, water. Nearby, a cobbler threads leather, his needle piercing through with a satisfying muted pop, repairing sandals that will walk Roman streets for yet another season. In both worlds, the afternoon is not a time of bustle, but of persistence. The labor is not frantic. It is measured, continuous, and deeply ordinary. Yet within that ordinariness lies a quiet dignity. The medieval peasant, turning soil or weaving thread, is not driven by ambition, but by the simple understanding that this work is life. The Roman citizen, whether scribe, vendor, or craftsman, moves with the same resigned grace, aware that each coin earned today will be spent on tomorrow's bread. The sensory world remains vivid, yet softened by familiarity. For the peasant, the scent of tilled earth mingles with the faint sweetness of hay stored in lofts overhead. The texture of wood, worn smooth by years of handling, feels almost like a second skin. In Rome, the air carries the sharper notes of spices from a nearby stall, the tang of olives and fish, the faint metallic scent of bronze and iron wares displayed for sale. Underfoot, the cobblestones remain warm, but less insistent than at midday, their heat radiating in a slow, fading breath. Children in both worlds weave in and out of these labors. In the village, they chase chickens along dusty lanes or sit beside their elders, awkwardly attempting to mimic the twist of wool or the grip of a hoe. In Rome, they dart between market stalls, their laughter rising above the low hum of commerce, or linger by a parent's side, observing the art of bargaining, of craftsmanship, of survival through small, daily acts. The work is repetitive, but it is not mindless. There is a rhythm to it, a pulse that requires presence. The peasant feels the subtle resistance of earth, reads the weather in the tilt of clouds, adjusts the pressure of their grip by instinct. The Roman artisan listens to the tone of a hammer strike, senses the balance of weight in a newly crafted amphora, judges the quality of leather by touch alone. These small acts of attentiveness are their own form of quiet pride, not celebrated, not spoken of, but deeply felt. As the afternoon leans into its latter hours, the pace does not quicken, but it does shift. There is an unspoken awareness that the evening meal is approaching, and with it, a brief cessation of toil. Tasks are wrapped up not in haste, but with the calm efficiency of those who have lived their lives in such rhythms. The peasant gathers tools, inspects the day's weaving, or checks the livestock once more before leading them back toward shelter. The Roman shopkeeper counts coins with a casual sweep of the hand, mentally calculating whether the day's earnings will suffice. There are small moments of satisfaction, an especially straight furrow in the field, a pot that dried without cracking, a repaired sandal that fits just so. These are not triumphs, but they are enough. In lives where luxury is rare and ease is fleeting, such small victories carry a quiet, enduring weight. As the sun begins its slow descent, the light softens, turning from a harsh glare to a golden hue that spills gently over rooftops and across fields. Shadows lengthen, stretching lazily across cobblestones and meadows alike. The air shifts, cooler now, carrying with it the sense of hearth fires being lit, of bread dough rising, of stews beginning to bubble in earthen pots. The day's work, though never truly finished, releases its grip for now. Tools are cleaned and stored, stalls are packed away, wax tablets are rolled and tied. There is no grand declaration of day's end, just a shared understanding that labor has given all it can for this day. In both the medieval village and the Roman city, the return to home is not a journey of triumph, but of quiet fulfillment. Another day's work, neither celebrated nor lamented, has been completed. As the sun tilts lower, its light mellowing into a warm amber hue, there is a quiet shift in both the medieval village and the Roman city. The day's work, though never fully done, begins to loosen its grip, and the thoughts of peasants and citizens alike drift, not toward rest yet, but toward food. The ache of hunger is not sudden. It has been building slowly throughout the day, a familiar companion, patient but insistent. Now in the soft hours of the late afternoon, it begins to nudge gently, reminding every belly that the evening meal, however modest, must be prepared. In the medieval peasant's hut, the preparation of dinner is an act of endurance rather than celebration. The hearth, set in the center of the single-room cottage, is not merely a place of warmth, but the heart of daily life. There is no kitchen as we might imagine, only a fire pit surrounded by a few blackened pots and wooden utensils, worn smooth from years of constant use. A small pile of firewood, gathered with care, is arranged methodically, the kindling catching flame with a sharp crackle that quickly softens into a steady, comforting hiss. The ingredients for the evening meal are simple and they are few. A handful of root vegetables, onions, perhaps a parsnip if the season is kind, are chopped with slow, deliberate motions, their skins curling onto the rough-hewn table. There may be a few wilted greens, foraged from the edges of fields, and, if fortune has smiled, a sliver of salted pork, more fat than meat, is added not for substance, but for flavor. These ingredients will become pottage, a thin, watery stew that has simmered in one form or another since morning, absorbing what little richness the day could offer. The peasant stirs the pot with a wooden spoon, feeling the resistance of the bubbling mixture, the familiar weight of it in the hand. There is no recipe, no precise measurement. The stew is as thick or as thin as the day's fortunes allow. The scent is humble, a mingling of earthy vegetables, wood smoke, and the faint tang of iron from the blackened cauldron. It is not a feast, but it is warm, and as the smoky air settles into the fabric of their tunics, it feels for a moment like enough. Meanwhile, in the heart of Rome, the preparation of dinner unfolds in a different setting, yet with similar restraints. For the vast majority of Roman citizens, the evening meal is not the lavish banquet of poets and emperors, but a simple, practical affair, born of what the day's earnings have allowed. The small insula apartment, cramped and dark, offers no private kitchen. Instead, cooking is done in communal spaces or at the street-side thermopolia, where hot food is sold from great clay jars embedded in stone counters. For those who can afford a few coins, a modest supper of pulse, a thick porridge of spelt or barley, is a staple. Perhaps it will be brightened with a drizzle of olive oil, a sprinkle of garum, the fermented fish sauce that perfumes Roman cuisine with its sharp, salty tang. If luck allows, there may be lentils stewed with herbs, or a few olives wrapped in a scrap of cloth, their brine seeping gently through. Bread, as always, is the centerpiece, coarse, dense, and slightly sour, baked earlier in the communal ovens that line the neighborhood streets. The evening air in Rome is filled with the scent of these small meals. Bread warmed over coals, the pungent allure of garum, the faint sweetness of chickpeas frying on an open griddle. Vendors call out their offerings in soft, rhythmic cadences, their voices blending into a gentle hum beneath the clatter of pottery and the shuffle of sandaled feet. The city does not fall silent, but it does soften as families gather bowls and platters, carrying them back to dimly lit rooms, where they will eat seated on low stools or reclining if space and status allow. For those wealthier households, the cena, the Roman evening meal, might be a more elaborate affair, with several courses and slaves tending to the slow, careful preparation of each dish. But for most, the meal is simple, filling, and unadorned, a reflection of a life where food is not an indulgence but a necessity, carefully measured against the weight of the day's labor. Back in the medieval hut, the peasant family gathers around the hearth, bowls of pottage cradled in hand. The meal is eaten slowly, not because of etiquette, but because there is no second helping. Each spoonful is savored, not for its richness, but for its warmth, its familiar texture. The stew is accompanied, as always, by rough hunks of bread, baked days ago, now softened by soaking in the broth. If ale is available, it is weak, barely alcoholic, but it serves as nourishment and hydration alike. Conversation is minimal. The day has been long, and words feel heavy. Occasionally, a remark about the weather, a murmured comment about a neighbor's misfortune, or a passing jest about the thinness of the stew breaks the quiet, but mostly the meal is consumed in a thoughtful silence, broken only by the soft clink of wooden spoons against earthenware bowls. There is no rush. The evening stretches ahead, and the hearth's glow offers a small oasis of comfort amidst the coarseness of daily life. In the Roman insula, the mood is similar. Families sit close in the small space, sharing platters of beans, bread, and perhaps a few figs purchased from a vendor earlier in the day. The light of an oil lamp casts soft, flickering shadows on the plastered walls, turning simple meals into rituals of endurance and modest pleasure. Conversations murmur in low voices, not about grand matters of state, but about the price of grain, the news from a neighbor's stall, the petty frustrations of a city that is always too crowded, too noisy, too unpredictable. In both worlds, the evening meal is not merely sustenance. It is a pause, a moment of grounding where the body, wearied by the day, finds brief comfort in the repetition of familiar tastes and scents. The food is simple, but it is dependable. The crackle of the fire, whether in a village hearth or a Roman brazier, is a shared song, lulling both peasant and citizen into a state of quiet acceptance. And as the bowls are emptied, the spoons set aside, and the firewood settles into glowing embers, there is a shared sense, across time and place, that this meal, however meager, is a small triumph. It is proof that the day has been met, that the work has borne enough fruit to sustain for another night. Hunger will return with the dawn, but for now it is stilled. Evening descends slowly, not with the abruptness of a curtain falling, but with the gradual softening of sounds, the dimming of light, the settling of bodies that have worked since dawn. In the medieval village, as the sun dips behind the low, rolling hills, the fields grow quiet, the tools are set aside, and the huts, scattered along narrow dirt lanes, become small islands of flickering firelight. There is no rush to sleep yet, but the day's energy has already been spent. What remains is not so much leisure, but a quiet lingering, an evening that stretches out, filled with simple, repetitive tasks, done slowly, without urgency. Inside the peasant's cottage, the family gathers close to the hearth. The warmth of the fire is not merely for comfort, it is a necessity, as the night's chill begins to creep in through gaps in the timber walls and the thatched roof. There is no furniture to speak of, just a few wooden stools, a rough bench, and the floor, strewn with straw and rushes that soften the hardness of packed earth beneath. The air is smoky, tinged with the lingering scent of the evening's pottage, and beneath it all, the subtle, ever-present musk of wool, sweat, and the outdoors. Some will busy their hands with mending. A tunic, worn thin at the elbows, is carefully stitched under the wavering glow of the firelight, the needle threading in and out with slow, deliberate movements. A child might be given the task of untangling a skein of rough wool, their small fingers working with a seriousness that belies their age. These are not chores done out of choice, but they fill the time, and in their quiet repetition, there is a strange, meditative calm. Conversation, when it happens, is soft and meandering. Perhaps a tale is told, not the grand sagas of knights and kings, but smaller stories, passed down from parent to child. Tales of the old woman who lives beyond the woods, who can heal or curse with the same whispered words, or simple recollections of days when the harvest was better, when the winter was less cruel. No one asks for excitement. These stories are not meant to thrill, but to accompany the passing of time, like the crackle of firewood or the distant hoot of an owl in the night. In another corner, tools might be repaired. A wooden rake with a missing tine, a knife that needs careful honing against a wet stone. These small acts of maintenance are not scheduled. They are done as needed, when hands are free, and when the firelight is just enough to see by. The work is patient, unhurried, but essential. Nothing is discarded if it can be fixed. In a life where every object is a hard-earned possession, care is a form of quiet reverence. Across the centuries, in a Roman insula, the scene unfolds differently, yet the essence remains the same. The apartment, a cramped space within a larger, bustling building, is dimly lit by a single oil lamp, its flame flickering against walls stained by years of smoke. The air is denser, carrying the mingled scents of cooked fish, lamp oil, and the faint, ever-present dust of the city. Through the thin walls, muffled voices drift in from neighboring homes, conversations blending into a soft, murmuring backdrop that never fully quiets. The Roman family gathers in this small space, seated on stools or reclining on low couches, depending on what their status allows. There may be a small table, its surface scarred by years of use, where they lay out simple games, dice, or small carved tokens moved across a scratched wooden board. The games are not elaborate. They are diversions to pass the time, accompanied by casual remarks, laughter in soft bursts, and the occasional groan of mock frustration as luck runs thin. For others, the evening is a time for small acts of craft. A father might repair a sandal, threading a strip of leather through a worn sole, while a mother patches a tunic, her fingers deft and quick. The tasks are much the same as those in the medieval village: mending, repairing, preserving. But here, within the stone walls of the Roman apartment, they unfold beneath a different rhythm. The city's pulse, though slower now, never ceases entirely. The sounds of passing footsteps in the street below, the faint clang of a vendor packing up his stall, the distant echoes of a tavern's song, all filter into the home, not intrusive, but as familiar as one's own heartbeat. Children, if they are present, sit close by, sometimes listening, sometimes playing. A parent may recite a fable, Aesop's tales of clever foxes and foolish crows, or recount a fragment of family history. It is a memory of when things were better, or at least when they seemed so. These stories, like those told in the village, are not grandiose. They are not intended to impress. They exist simply to fill the space between work and sleep, to weave a soft net of familiarity where the world outside feels large and impersonal. For both peasant and Roman citizen, the evening is a time of low expectations. Leisure, as a concept of indulgence or relaxation, does not truly exist. Time not spent working is still purposeful, even if that purpose is as simple as resting the body, or keeping the hands busy while the mind drifts. There are no luxuries of entertainment, no books to read by firelight, no grand performances to attend. What exists is the company of family, the repetition of small necessary tasks, and the gentle settling of the body into a slower rhythm. The lighting in both worlds, soft, flickering, and always insufficient, makes faces seem distant even when seated close. Shadows dance along rough wooden beams in the peasant's hut, while in Rome the oil lamp casts strange elongated shapes on stone walls, blurring the edges of the familiar. This dimness creates a kind of quiet intimacy. Voices remain low, not just out of habit, but because loudness feels unnecessary here, where the night itself leans in, close and attentive. As the hours stretch on, the tasks grow fewer. The needle is set aside, the sandals are left to finish another day, and bodies begin to lean more heavily into rest. The conversations become sparser, words trailing off into comfortable silences. There is no official bedtime. Sleep arrives when it chooses, gradually enveloping the household in its slow, drowsy embrace. In both the medieval village and the Roman city, family time is not a matter of scheduled quality moments. It is not shaped by activities designed to bond or entertain. It is simply the act of existing together, quietly, in the aftermath of a day's labor. The bonds formed here are not loud or dramatic. They are stitched into the fabric of daily life through shared endurance, shared meals, and shared silences. And so, as the fire in the hearth settles into a bed of glowing embers, and the oil lamp's flame flickers lower, these families, peasants beneath a thatched roof, Romans beneath layers of stone, prepare to meet the night. Not with fanfare, but with the soft mutual understanding that tomorrow will bring the same rhythm, the same tasks, the same quiet evenings. Evening entertainment. The phrase might suggest images of music, laughter, and jubilant crowds, but in the lives of a medieval peasant and an ordinary Roman citizen, it unfolds in a far humbler, quieter form. These were not lives adorned with grand diversions. Their evenings, much like their days, were shaped by necessity. And so, as the last embers of the hearth glowed in a peasant's cottage, or as the dim oil lamp flickered in a Roman insula, the ways people sought to fill the time before sleep were soft, simple, and slow. In the medieval village, after the evening meal and the quiet murmur of family tasks, there comes a kind of collective pause. The air in the hut is warmer now, the day's labor settled into aching limbs, and though there is always work that could be done, there's little urgency left in the hours before night fully claims the world. Entertainment, if one could call it that, drifts in naturally. Never planned, never grand. It might begin with a hummed melody, a tune passed down through generations, rising softly from one corner of the room. Not a performance, but a simple, wordless tune, a sound to accompany the fire's crackle, to fill the space where conversation has ebbed away. Sometimes when voices feel less heavy, a song may be shared. Folk songs shaped by the soil and seasons, telling stories of harvests of old saints, of love lost and found, though rarely in grand poetic fashion. The lyrics are often repetitive, simple, almost like a chant, meant to be sung by many voices together, their rough edges smoothed by the repetition of centuries. There are no instruments, save for a clapped rhythm or the tapping of a wooden spoon against a pot, and yet, in this minimalism, there is a quiet beauty, a shared understanding that music does not need to be polished to be soothing. Tales may also be told, not the sprawling epics of kings and knights, but smaller local stories. A tale of a trickster fox outsmarting a farmer, or of a ghost said to haunt the bend of the river on misty mornings. These stories are not told with dramatic flair, but with a slow, meandering cadence, the kind that allows the mind to wander alongside the tale, not in rapt attention, but in a gentle drift. The storyteller does not seek applause. They speak simply because stories have always been told in the quiet before sleep. For children, if they are not yet surrendered to slumber, there may be a simple game, perhaps a round of knucklebones, played with small sheep bones, their fingers nudging the worn pieces across the dirt floor. Their giggles muffled, not out of fear, but out of a natural hush that settles over the household as night deepens. These games are not about victory or competition. They are ways to keep small hands busy, to ease restless bodies into the stillness of sleep. Meanwhile, in Rome, evening entertainment for the common citizen follows a similar, unpretentious rhythm. The grand spectacles of the Colosseum and the theater are far away, reserved for those with leisure time and coin to spare. For most families in their crowded insula apartments, entertainment is what can be found within arm's reach. A few worn dice, a short song, or the company of a neighbor who stops by with news from the forum. Dice games are perhaps the most common pastime. Small, carved cubes, some made of bone, others of clay, are thrown onto the table or even directly onto the stone floor. The game itself is simple, but the conversations that float around it are where the true amusement lies. Gentle teasing, whispered wagers of a fig or a piece of bread, the soft clatter of dice marking time as the evening darkens. There is no sense of gambling in the modern sense. The stakes are too modest, and the game is more about passing time than winning. It is a rhythm, a soft tapping of bone against wood, a distraction for tired minds. Some might take up a piece of wax tablet and stylus, idly tracing shapes or words in the soft surface, not out of any pressing need, but simply to let the hand move while the mind floats. A neighbor might recount the latest absurdity heard at the baths, some minor scandal, or the boasts of a merchant who claims to have dined with a senator. These stories are shared not to impress, but to provoke soft, knowing smiles, to momentarily lift the mind from the day's labor. Music, when it is present, is usually a single voice, singing softly. Perhaps an old Roman hymn, or a simple tune sung to children to coax them into sleep. There are no lyres or flutes in these humble homes, only the human voice, softened by the day's fatigue. The song does not seek an audience. It merely fills the space, like the gentle rustle of cloth as someone folds away the day's tunics. For those who lived near a tavern or within earshot of a street performer, faint traces of public entertainment might drift through the window. a lute's delicate pluck, a distant burst of laughter from a storyteller's punchline. But these sounds are distant, softened by walls and distance, more of an atmospheric murmur than a direct invitation. For the average Roman citizen, going out for evening amusement is rare. The city, even as it winds down, is not a place of ease after dark. Fires are a constant risk, and the streets, narrow and uneven, are not designed for idle evening strolls. Thus, in both the medieval village and the Roman city, entertainment becomes something intimate, something self-made. It does not aspire to grandeur, and it does not demand attention. It exists to gently guide the mind from the concerns of the day into the softer thoughts of evening. There is a rhythm to these simple pastimes, a predictable cadence that soothes as much as it distracts. As the evening stretches on, even these small diversions begin to fade. The dice are gathered and set aside. The last stories are told, trailing off not in grand conclusions, but in soft, unfinished sentences. The songs quiet down, their melodies left hanging in the stillness. The body, long since wearied by labor, begins to surrender fully to the heaviness of the night. What remains is a shared quiet, not an awkward silence, but a mutual understanding that the day is done, and that there is peace in simply sitting together, saying nothing, listening to the soft crackle of the hearth or the distant echoes of a world that continues to move outside. There is no expectation of excitement, no desire for more. In these moments, the simplicity of company, of presence, is its own kind of gentle entertainment, and as the eyes grow heavier, and the last embers of the fire settle into a faint glow, both the medieval peasant and the Roman citizen prepare for the quiet rituals of cleaning themselves, however modestly, before they surrender to sleep. The entertainment of the evening has served its quiet purpose, not to distract, but to soothe. Cleanliness, or at least the attempt at it, was a quiet ritual that marked the threshold between waking life and sleep in both the medieval village and the Roman city. Though centuries and customs separate them, the act of washing away the day's dust and labor was a small, persistent gesture of care. Never perfect, rarely thorough, but meaningful in its own quiet way. For neither the medieval peasant nor the Roman citizen could afford the luxury of bathing as we know it. Cleanliness was more of a negotiation, a modest compromise with their surroundings and their means. In the peasant's hut, the evening air has grown cooler, and the fire's warmth, though comforting, cannot fully erase the damp chill that seeps through the earthen floor and the rough wooden walls. There is no dedicated place for washing, no basin with fresh water awaiting use. Instead, a simple wooden barrel near the doorway holds rainwater collected from earlier in the week. It is cold, even in summer, and though the water's clarity is questionable, it serves its purpose. The act of washing here is not about luxury or vanity. It is about brushing away just enough of the day's grime to feel slightly less weighed down by it. A cloth, perhaps no more than a strip of worn linen, is dipped into the barrel. The cold shock of water against the skin is bracing, waking the senses momentarily in a day otherwise dulled by fatigue. Faces are wiped, not scrubbed. Hands, stained from earth and labor, are given a few firm passes. Arms and neck, where the sweat of the day's toil clings most heavily, receive attention, though it is often more a gesture than a solution. Dirt remains. It always does. But the coolness of water, the act of pausing to tend to oneself, even briefly, offers a small sense of renewal before sleep. There is an acceptance among the peasant household that true cleanliness is rare. Lice are an unwelcome but constant companion, and though efforts are made, combing hair with fine-toothed bone combs, shaking out blankets, brushing straw from tunics, perfection is neither expected nor achievable. Yet, these small routines persist, passed down from generation to generation, not because they banish dirt entirely, but because they soften the feeling of it, if only for a night. The process is unceremonious. There is no privacy, no separate chamber for these ablutions. Families perform these routines side by side, sharing the same water, the same cloth, in the same dim light of the hearth. Modesty is a luxury they cannot afford. Practicality reigns instead. What matters is not how clean one becomes, but the act of trying. And as the last pass of the cloth is made, as hair is roughly finger-combed, and as hands are wiped against woolen tunics, in a final absent-minded motion, the body feels, if not clean, then at least acknowledged. In the Roman insula, the ritual of evening hygiene unfolds differently, yet with a familiar modesty. The idea of Roman baths evokes grand images of marble pools and steamy chambers, but for the common citizen, those public bathhouses are often far away, and in the quiet hours of evening, they are closed or unsafe. Instead, in the cramped confines of a family apartment, personal hygiene becomes an exercise in resourcefulness. A small ceramic jug of water stands ready near a shallow basin, or perhaps a simple bucket serves the purpose. The water is not fresh from a fountain, but carried up from the street below earlier in the day. It is tepid now, having sat through the heat of the afternoon, but it serves its function. Romans, even of modest means, often rely not just on water, but on oil to clean themselves. A small pot of olive oil, slightly cloudy from repeated use, is taken up, and fingers dip into its surface. The process of cleaning with oil and a striggle is not as luxurious as it might sound. Oil is rubbed gently onto the skin, arms, neck, face, loosening the dirt and sweat gathered from the day's errands, the dust of Roman streets, the grime of crowded markets. Then comes the striggle, a simple curved metal scraper, drawn slowly across the skin, removing oil, dirt, and dead skin in a thin, grim smear. It is not a gentle process, but neither is it painful. The motion is practiced, almost absent-minded, and like the peasant's cloth, it is less about becoming truly clean and more about the soothing act of trying. For many, the ritual is quiet, solitary, though families may share the space and the tools. There is a certain Roman pride in being presentable, in not appearing entirely disheveled, but within the walls of the home, the standards soften. A parent might wipe a child's face with a damp cloth, fingers smudging away the day's dirt with affectionate gruffness. Another may comb through hair with a simple wooden comb, picking out debris with the patience of one accustomed to repetition. Lice, fleas, and dust are just as much a part of Roman life as they are in the medieval village. The apartment buildings, with their thin walls and shared spaces, offer little defense against the small intrusions of city life. Still, the rituals endure. They endure because there is comfort in routine, in the small acts of control over a world that is otherwise untamed. As these cleansing rituals come to an end, both the peasant and the Roman citizen feel the subtle shift towards sleep. The cloth is wrung out and hung near the fire to dry. The strigil is wiped clean and set aside. The water, now tinged with the residue of the day, will be emptied or left for morning chores. These objects, humble and unadorned, are the quiet tools of evening, bridging the gap between the harshness of labor and the softness of sleep. In neither world is there the expectation of feeling fresh or pristine. The sense of cleanliness is fleeting, almost symbolic. Yet these rituals carry with them a quiet dignity. They are acts of self-care not born from luxury, but from the simple human need to mark the end of a day. A way to tell the body, you have done enough, you are cared for even in this small way. As the final motions of wiping and combing are completed, and as bodies wrap themselves in rough woolen blankets or simple linen sheets, the night fully settles. Limbs still sore from labor are now permitted to rest. The body, though never fully clean, feels a little lighter, a little less burdened by the day's grime. Night has fallen completely now. The faint murmurs of evening songs, dice games, and soft conversations have faded into the stillness. Yet, stillness does not mean comfort. For both the medieval peasant and the Roman citizen, the night brings its own challenges. and chief among them is the creeping cold that seeps through walls, floors, and thin bedding, making sleep less of a cozy retreat and more of a practiced endurance. In the medieval peasant's hut, the fire has been banked, its once lively flames now reduced to a dull, reddish glow beneath a cover of ash. There is little wood to spare. Every log has been rationed carefully through the day. The warmth that remains radiates outward in a small, shrinking circle, barely enough to warm those nearest to the hearth. The air inside the cottage is cold, not dramatically so at first, but with a creeping persistence that works its way through the thick woolen tunics and coarse blankets. There is a particular kind of cold in these huts, not the sharp bite of winter winds, but a damp, stubborn chill, clinging to the stone floor and rising slowly as the night deepens. The straw-stuffed mattresses offer little insulation. They are lumpy, uneven, and over time, the straw compresses into hard patches that provide more familiarity than comfort. The woolen blankets, rough against bare skin, trap some of the body's warmth, but not all. Peasant families often sleep close together, sharing body heat not out of sentiment, but out of necessity. Children are nestled between adults, their small bodies shivering less when pressed against the warmth of others. Privacy dissolves in these shared sleeping arrangements, but so too does isolation. The family becomes a small, huddled fortress against the cold night air. Even so, the cold finds its way in, through the gaps in the wooden walls, through the roof's thatching, through the very floor itself. There is a particular sound that accompanies it, the faint rustle of straw, the creak of wood as someone shifts to find a warmer position, the quiet sighs of resigned discomfort. It is a cold that does not shock but instead lingers, settling into bones and muscles already worn thin by the day's labor. There is no expectation of warmth here, only the hope that sleep will come soon enough, making the cold less noticeable. In Rome, the scene is different, yet familiar in its discomfort. The insula apartments, built tall and fast to house the city's ever-growing population, offer little protection against the night air. The lower floors, reserved for the wealthier tenants, are sturdier, cooler in the summer, and slightly more insulated in the winter. But for most, the upper floors are home, small, cramped spaces where the walls are thin and the cold drafts flow freely through cracks and ill-fitted shutters. Roman bedding is simple: a low wooden frame, a mattress stuffed with straw or rags, and a woolen blanket or two, if one is lucky. The walls may be stone, but the chill seeps in all the same. And unlike the medieval hut, where the fire's dying embers offer at least some lingering warmth, the Roman insula rarely has a fire within the apartment itself. Fires are dangerous in these towering, flammable structures. Heat comes from layers of clothing, from thick cloaks used as makeshift blankets, and from the closeness of other bodies. The night in a Roman apartment is also filled with sound, not the silence of a countryside night, but the constant, muffled hum of urban life. Voices drift from neighboring rooms separated only by thin walls. Footsteps echo from the stairways. Rats scurry beneath floorboards and across beams, their tiny claws tapping out faint rhythms as they search for scraps. The city does not sleep quietly. For a Roman citizen, the challenge of night is not just the cold, but the inescapable presence of others. Privacy is scarce. Solitude is a rare luxury. Still, people find their own ways to adapt. Extra tunics are folded and layered for added warmth. Woolen cloaks, worn during the day, double as bedding at night. The body curls into itself, seeking the smallest pockets of retained heat. The cold, like the noise, becomes something to sleep through rather than escape from. And yet, in both the medieval village and the Roman city, sleep does come. Not easily, perhaps, and not always comfortably, but eventually, the body's exhaustion overcomes the distractions of cold and noise. The peasant, lying on straw, shifts to find that familiar spot where the mattress sags just so, allowing their weight to settle. The Roman, curled beneath a cloak, listens as the sounds of the city fade into a distant hum. The discomfort is ever present, yet the human body, so practiced in enduring, learns to ignore it just enough to drift away. There is a rhythm to these nights, a shared breath across centuries, the quiet rustling of blankets, the soft exhalations of tired bodies, the occasional cough or murmur that briefly stirs the room. These are not the peaceful, luxurious sleeps of modern imagination, but they are no less real. Sleep, for both peasant and citizen, is a necessity, not a pleasure. It is a chance to retreat, to let the aches of the day recede, even if only for a few hours. The cold of night is not an enemy that can be defeated, but a companion to be accepted. Over time, both medieval villagers and Roman citizens learned to sleep through it, to let the discomfort exist without letting it rule. There is no tossing or turning for the sake of it. Bodies remain still, conserving heat, conserving energy. Sleep is shallow, often interrupted, yet it is enough. It has to be. As the night deepens, the outside world becomes a distant thought. For the medieval peasant, the fields are invisible now, hidden beneath a blanket of darkness. The livestock, too, are settled, their breathing slow and steady. For the Roman citizen, the markets are quiet, the forum empty, the clatter of daytime life replaced by a softer, more irregular rhythm of the sleeping city. Time itself seems to slow, the hours stretching in the half-wakefulness of those who have learned to rest in less than ideal conditions. Eventually, the cold becomes less noticeable, not because it has lessened, but because the mind has shifted. In sleep, the body forgets its discomfort. The woolen blankets, though rough, grow warm from shared breath and proximity. The city noises fade into a distant murmur, like the soft pulse of a far-off river. In these moments, both the medieval peasant and the Roman citizen find a fragile peace. But not all sleep is peaceful. Nighttime brings its own set of worries, of unspoken fears that linger in the dark. Before sleep takes them fully, minds wander to thoughts of what the next day will bring, of harvests and taxes, of debts and unstable walls. The night's chill is not just physical, it carries with it the cold weight of uncertainty. And yet, the body sleeps, because it must, because it always has. The hours after midnight carry a stillness that feels deeper than simple quiet. The world outside may rest, but inside the minds of those lying awake, small worries unfold, slowly and insistently, like creeping tendrils through the cracks of sleep. For both the medieval peasant and the Roman citizen, night is not merely for rest. It is a time when the body slows, but the mind, freed from the distractions of work and noise, begins to fill the silence with thoughts that are too easily ignored by day. In the peasant's hut, the fire's embers have faded to a soft, pulsing glow, not enough to warm, but still enough to throw faint, shifting patterns on the low ceiling. The family lies close together, a tangle of limbs beneath rough woolen blankets, their breathing soft and uneven. Yet, within this small cocoon of shared body heat, not every eye is closed. A mother stares upward, counting the faint creaks of the wooden beams overhead, wondering if the thatch roof will hold through the next rain. A father, though his body aches for sleep, listens to the faint wheeze of a child's breath, worrying whether it is the start of another cough that could worsen, quietly, dangerously, through the night. Worry in the medieval village often centers on things that feel simple in their enormity: the harvest, the weather, the health of livestock. A bad crop could mean hunger, not in a dramatic, instant way, but in a long, gnawing shortage that stretches through the winter. Taxes owed to the Lord hang over their thoughts as well, a silent tallying of what has been taken and what little remains. The fear is not of sudden ruin, but of a slow slide into deeper poverty, where every borrowed coin is a new weight, and every missing chicken or failed seed is a subtraction from an already thin ledger. There is also a kind of quiet, personal worry that hums beneath the surface. The small aches that do not fade, the sore hand that did not heal properly, The constant worry that an illness, so minor now, might swell into something beyond the village healer's simple remedies. These are not fears that burst into panic. They arrive as whispers, slowly eroding the edges of peace, making the mind loop through the same thoughts again and again, as though rehearsing troubles might somehow prevent them. Across time and space, in a Roman insula, similar worries settle into the night. The sounds of the city, once loud and persistent, have quieted, but not disappeared. A distant shout echoes from a far alley. The faint scrape of pottery, perhaps from a neighbor's late meal, drifts through the thin walls. Yet, within these small apartments, the most intrusive noises are often internal. The thoughts that arise when the body is still but the mind is restless. For a Roman citizen of modest means, the night is filled with the weight of practical concerns. Rent is due soon, and the landlord's patience is famously thin. The insula creaks and shifts, the dry wooden beams whispering unsettling reminders that these tall, hastily built structures can, and do, collapse without warning. The danger is not immediate, not every night, but it looms, a quiet possibility that must be lived with. Debts are another nightly visitor. Rome's bustling markets and forums offer opportunity, but also entanglements. A few borrowed denarii to cover a lean week, a favor owed to a patron with its strings quietly tightening over time. At night, in the dark, these transactions become heavy thoughts, each coin a small weight pressing down on a restless chest. Family worries are present here as well. A father wonders if his son will find steady work in the markets, or if another week will pass with no wages. A mother thinks of her daughter, working long hours in another household, hoping she is treated kindly, knowing she may not be. Illness, fires, and theft, constant possibilities in a crowded, bustling city, visit the mind in quiet flashes, less as vivid fears and more as a persistent, dull anxiety that never fully sleeps. Yet, beneath these personal worries, there is a shared human truth. Both the medieval peasant and the Roman citizen, though separated by centuries and by the weight of history, lie awake under similar skies, pondering the same basic uncertainties. Will there be enough food? Will the roof hold? Will the debts be paid? Will the family stay safe? Their surroundings differ. One hears the soft bleat of a distant sheep, the other the muted clatter of a cartwheel on a cobbled street. But their thoughts spiral in familiar patterns, slowly circling problems with no immediate solution. These nighttime worries do not always bring tears or visible distress. They are, more often, quiet companions, accepted as part of life, even as they weigh heavy in the dark. The mind practices a kind of restless accounting, tallying up small failures and future troubles, rehearsing conversations with landlords, imagining the yield of a field that has not yet sprouted. It is not a frantic panic, but a slow, persistent hum, a background noise to sleep, as constant as the creak of timber or the shuffle of straw beneath a shifting body. Yet sleep does come, eventually. The body's fatigue is relentless, and even as the mind worries, it cannot keep the body awake forever. Worries are not solved, they are merely postponed, shelved for another day as the mind slips into dreams. These dreams are often simple, fleeting, not grand visions of escape, but small hopes, a day without pain, a market with good sales, a harvest that surprises with its bounty. As the hours stretch toward dawn, the worries quieten, not because they are resolved, but because the body insists on rest. The darkness softens. Breathing slows. Whether in a rural hut surrounded by fields or a crowded apartment pressed against countless others, sleep becomes a small, stubborn act of survival, a quiet defiance against the weight of worry. And when the first light of dawn begins to seep through wooden shutters or thin cloth-covered windows, these worries will return, reshaped into the practical tasks of the day. The debts, the repairs, the harvests, they all wait, patient and unchanged. But for now, in the brief hush before morning, there is a stillness that is neither peace nor defeat. It is simply the rhythm of life, quietly endured.